Hello and welcome to the developer commentary here in Lightmatter. We are very close to releasing our game on Steam, and we thought it would be interesting to record some developer commentaries because this project has been long and we have a lot of thoughts and feelings, and it could just be funny to share some of those with you.
Yeah, now we're 1 week from release.
Yeah, it's really strange to we have been working on this like since 2016, and now it's almost out there. So, very briefly, this game started out as a university project back in 2013, where we made a prototype and won some student awards. And then we decided a little bit later that we would like to pursue this concept further, and we decided to make tunnel vision games. And we are based here in Aalborg in Denmark, and we have been working on the game for a couple of years now. And hopefully you have played it. Hopefully you already played it. If not, that's also okay. The plan is to have these developer commentaries, one in each level, so you can kind of like hear about the design process and other things as well. So this is like just a brief introduction. My name is Gustav, and I'm working as the producer and a programmer here at Tunnel Vision. And my job is basically to do all the system programming stuff, like, for example, the saving system, the subtitles, some performance stuff, some gameplay stuff, lots of things here and there. And as a producer, I have also been the person who is in contact with like partners that can be, for example, publishers and PR and social media and all the things to talk about the game and get it out there. And I'm sitting here together with Benjamin.
Yeah, and I'm the narrative designer and programmer on this project, and that basically means, for at least for the narrative side, that I've basically worked a lot with the universe and try to give the mechanics meaning and build up the story structure. And also, we were 3 writers on the project, but I'm the one that spent the most time on it, kind of spearheading that department. And on the programming side, I've done mostly graphics programming, so that means all the shaders in the game and kind of like the art style relevant things, and a lot with like how the game looks with the edge detection and comic book shading and the reflections in the shadows and stuff like that. But and also worked a bit on systems and gameplay, but it's mostly been computer graphics programming. So yeah, and maybe we should just start talking about this level.
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
So this is a puzzle game, as you probably know. But we decided to start the first level off not as a puzzle, but more as an introduction to movement of the game, because we do want this game to be accessible to many people, and we wanted to introduce the fundamental movement elements like turning and walking and jumping and vaulting. And then it felt like a good opportunity to introduce some world building, because that's some very simple stuff, and it's easy to introduce some environmental storytelling, stuff like that. And for instance, by having this tram that's leaving the facility and having this announcer voice talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a bit interesting actually how this announcer voice that you hear in the beginning was one of the last things we implemented in the narrative, because we built this very big level that introduces a lot of things, and we felt it was actually a bit empty.
Yeah, it was.
So having this announcer voice that kind of just lays a few breadcrumbs about where you are, but without directly answering it too much. Like we kind of felt that it gave a bit, it caught your attention a bit.
Mm-hmm. And it just gives you a place, and like it raises some questions. What happened before I arrived here, and what's going on, and who is this Virgil character that this announcer is talking about, and like hopefully it makes you curious and to follow and see what's going on in this game.
Yeah, and also the room that you wake up in is it's a bit weird, but that's a bit on purpose because we want people to think about what was I actually doing in there.
Mm-hmm.
Why is there servers, computers around me, and we like to not answer too many questions in the beginning, but more ask questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's it for this level. Hopefully you will listen to the other developer commentaries. The idea is that multiple people from the team will talk about like various aspects. It can be puzzle design, it can be the narrative, it can be technicalities, graphics, art style, many things. So yeah, you can just continue playing and find these developer commentaries.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Ostea. I'm the artist on this game, and what I do is make props and make sense of the levels and how they look.
And my name is Lasse, and I'm the level designer. And I've put together most of the levels like with our building blocks, and from there we have taken them to the state they are now. So this level, how do we start on this one?
Yeah, well, the most important part of this was introducing the main character, Virgil. And I guess, yeah, Virgil is pretty much inspired by Elon Musk. And one of his main purposes is also to add some humor to the game, because very early on in the development, this game kind of looks like a horror game, we realized. So it was really important for us to get some jokes in there. Where the most of the humor comes out of him insulting you and other people. And I guess that's very natural for our company, because that's the way we talk to each other.
Yeah, that's done a lot here. And to build up a bit on the game not looking scary, it was quite a challenging thing to pull off, because there's a lot of darkness and it's a lab in most cases, so it's very easy to drift into a scary evil lab stereotype.
And completely empty as well. No other people.
Yeah, really. No people. Everybody looks dead, maybe. Yeah. So that was quite a challenge, and I had to work quite a lot with shape language and not making too many dark and pointy things that look malicious and absolutely evil, as in machinery that's meant to dissect or something like that. So that was quite something, and I worked quite a bit on making it look like humans actually stayed there and it was okay, like an hour ago.
Yes.
Yeah, and although we are very inspired by Portal, obviously, from like Cave Johnson and Gladys and all that, we try to deviate a bit from it by not having a disembodied character, like showing Virgil up front that he's a human. That's why the primary focus of the beginning of this level is that you see his silhouette right in front of you. Yeah. And we wanted to, also the other purpose is to kind of sync up with him, that you notice him, that you have like a slight interaction with him, that he comments things you do, such as walking through a door or opening a door. And that's primarily based on that in other games that works pretty well, that you just get to sync up with the character that's talking to you.
And it's very step by step, this level as well, because we wanted to kind of keep the player in one place and actually listening to Virgil as he speaks, to get that connection, so they don't run off and do something else, because it is in the beginning of the level, so of course there's interesting stuff to look at, but we wanted them to sync up completely with Virgil, so we have like small fish tanks that we lock the player in and restrict the play area that they have. And then of course we have the interaction between Virgil and the player, where they cooperate in opening the security doors so that the player can proceed. And Virgil hints towards the shadows being dangerous, but kind of, what does he say? He says
it's dark
in there, you might trip. Like to kind of
such an obvious lie.
Yeah, and closes the door right in your face, and then of course he opens the gates into the core, which illuminates the path that you need to take afterwards towards the elevator. And it was always the plan that before we had Virgil in this level, it was always the plan to have the core shown in the beginning of the level of the game, since it's, as you find out during the game, that it's the main reason for the shadows being dangerous. So you have to interact with it somehow throughout the game, and it was important for us to show it up front. And also the core shaking, emitting these shockwaves, also is kind of a convenience for us. It's first and foremost showing that it's unstable, like something went wrong. You already got that vibe from the first level, the previous level, but it also helps in us explaining how or why so many like bridges and walls have fallen apart throughout the level to, from a strict puzzle perspective, restrict the player to.
We use the broken apart, like broken bridges and walls fallen apart and things like that to explain so much geometry that otherwise would make zero sense.
Yeah, and it is like the puzzle had to make sense, so we came up with an excuse for that, and that became it, and it kind of makes sense. You can kind of see that. Okay.
This would cause a bridge to collapse.
Yeah.
And I guess also when designing like the effects for the core, we went for powerful but not magical. That's why we like it has sort of a northern light look on it.
It had to look not entirely like a laser because, well, lasers are kind of, when you look at scientific photos, they're kind of boring. I mean, not to diss lasers, but they're just a stripe. So it had to look like some kind of light phenomenon.
Yeah.
And that's what we went with.
Light-based scientific beam of stuff.
Yeah, and I think like some of us, or a lot of us in the company, are big Half-Life fans, and I think yeah, and I think just subconsciously that influenced the design of it.
Yeah.
From the first Half-Life, yeah.
But it is fun that I think it's episode 1, Half-Life 2, where they actually have a kind of similar structure in place, like a beam extending from a ceiling to a bottom, like a floor, and then you have to do something with it. But I mean, I couldn't remember it before we designed this.
It just happened.
But then I revisited Half-Life 2, and then saw it again. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah. Is that it?
I could talk a bit about James's office.
Yeah.
It was a really fun part to decorate that one because a lot of the facility is very impersonal. There are hundreds of people working here who don't have names in the story and don't have personalities. And even though I try to come up with, okay, here is the corner of a person who makes this and that and is probably tidy and likes sandwiches, and on weekends they sing karaoke. I came up with a lot of fake people who never are in the story, just have desks and left their personal belongings behind.
Family pictures.
There's quite a lot of those. It was a lot of fun designing James's office because he's a real person and he's bulky, so there's weights, and he has a cat, so there's cat house and all kinds of things he would like. It was a lot of fun giving him a little bit of personality just through props that are in his office.
Yeah, he's a big sensitive man.
I even scaled up, like, we have these standard issue chairs and desks throughout the facility. I scaled up everything a little bit just because he's such a big person.
But then he has a very small, cute button that he has to press to open it.
Yes.
It's just usually one finger.
Yes, that's one finger button for him, but for most people, they would have to use a whole hand.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and then towards the end of this level, when you reach the elevator, it's kind of our excuse to setting back the progress of the player, so they end up in the bottom of the facility and have to progress through the whole facility to escape.
Yeah,
and
go ahead. It's kind of inspired by like the trope where you start out very close to the goal of something, or start out with all the power-ups and then you go all the way back to square one.
Yeah.
And also, in order to show people the facility and show people the crystals in the mining area and stuff like that. So you learn something about the facility.
Hello, my name is Ulrik and I'm the audio designer for Lightmatter. I've been working on the music and all the effects and all sound in the game. We're going to talk a little about Can't Walk in Shadow, this level. And the last level was Virgil's office, and there was a lot of noise, and you are crashing with this elevator into this level. So to make a contrast from all the noise in the previous level, it's actually pretty quiet in this level. So you start up with almost no sound, and then later on we fade in some music to ease you into the puzzle feeling mode. And Can't Walk in Shadows is a level that's designed towards, this is the first time you can actually die in the game.
Die, yes.
Yeah.
And of course it was important for us to make sure that at least there was a chance that the player could die, so they could experience the shadows firsthand. It is built towards both the more skilled players who kind of understand the mechanic up front, so they can react to what is going to happen, so they can actually prevent themselves from dying if they're quick. And then the ones who are not as quick will die and get the feeling of how the mechanic works. But no matter what, they have to cross the darkness to get to the other side and continue to the next level. And we forced them to do that by having this small jump puzzle with a blinking light, so they have to not react fast, but a little bit. Yes. And the beginning of the game is, or not the game, this level is kind of maneuvering you around the black pit or office area, whatever you want to call it, in the mine, to kind of emphasize the reflections of the shadows, and also to give room to Virgil to kind of talk to the player and explain some stuff.
I remember that it was always this level. We always wanted it to feel like a contrast from the previous, in also in the way that Virgil can't really reach out to you immediately. Like his voice is distorted, and kind of to make it feel a little more dangerous. This place you're in, that you've and also that you've fallen you're far away from him now. But yeah, about like the dying in shadows. If we go back, in the beginning we didn't. In the beginning of the narrative, it wasn't necessarily the idea that you were gonna die in the shadows. Like that came in, I think, maybe 1.5, 2 years into the project. We find out that when you go into the shadows, you actually die. Like that's the explanation in the universe, because what happens is that you just go back a few minutes or a few seconds with checkpoints. But we went that direction with explaining that you actually die, because we think it's interesting to have like this primal element in the game, which we feel like in many puzzle games there isn't really this death and this like something that feels actually dangerous and a bit eerie and sinister. So in the beginning, when you went into the shadows, the screen would just fade out. But then we added more things, and we added like the screen is being eaten up, like a vignette, like from the corners, and then we added like these bubbly things, like as if it's acid, like dissolving your body, that goes into the air. And we like slowly throughout these years like added a few more effects to the death effect. And it's very nice that we have a guy in the company who's very sensitive to motion sickness and stuff like that. Because we do like a vertigo effect, and we could clearly tell when he got too sick from dying.
Yeah. And the death effect is also sound-wise is following the bubbly. It's kind of a tar-like matter. So
exactly.
So I also I also in the mix take all high frequencies out of all the sounds that's there.
Yes, and that also supports the way the reflections look. We always our reference has always been like tar.
Yeah.
And I think that even we've been wanting to do that from the very beginning of the project. I remember it just we just thought it was, I don't even know how it came up, but it's just something we've been wanting to do, and all of a sudden 1.5 years into the project we were able to do it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Hello, I'm Philip Newman, and I'm the CEO of Tunnel Vision Games. My primary responsibilities in the company is running the company.
Yeah, that's very important.
Yes, so it's all from economics to talking with publishers, to talking with funds, to like who give us money. It's like I've been trying to make sure that we get bread on the table each month as far as we can, and so it's like everything that has to do with the company that is not game development.
Yeah.
I have been trying to take care of and like catch the grenades so it doesn't explode in your faces. So you can focus, you can have a deeper focus on developing and designing the game going on. And besides that, especially in the later periods of the project, I've also come back to doing some actual work on the game, which have been very thrilling and
being back in Unity.
Yes, and being much needed for like craved almost. And you sometimes only understand how hungry you are for it when you start eating again. So this level is was made to help us showcase the game better. We saw a need for a level that kind of explained the moving shadows concept without any mechanics, but the buttons that move stuff. And it was very important we saw that it was very important to have something that explained this more to people in a way.
Yeah, I guess we showcased this, not this level, but other levels at conventions. And in the beginning, we just dropped them into a level with lamps and other mechanics. And some people understood the shadow concept, but others, they needed something a little more like a softer introduction.
Something visually also appealing in terms of stuff moving. Some people have a hard time imagining how things are when they have moved and shifted, especially when there's something weird like this going on.
Yeah. So we decided to make this a level where the shadows are just in your face and you cannot get through them without understanding that if you push the button, then something will move and then the shadow will also move with it. And our hope is that because this level is kind of like, if you don't get it, then you cannot solve it. So you have to push the buttons. It's very simple. But when you do it, you understand it, and then going forward, you should know how the shadows work in our game.
Yeah, at least on a very basic level.
Yeah.
And that is exactly the intention of this. And going to these conventions and showcasing it, like we have seen that this level, it gets the job done.
Yeah.
Like people, like they seem to get this is actually the first real puzzle of the game where you actually have to do something active, besides jumping and moving to get forward. So we really wanted something that could like smooth the experience, both in terms of difficulty and in terms of the learning curve that is not too steep at this point in the game. Besides that, this is also a good entry point to talk about like some of the stuff that I've been happy to work on in the game as well, like because going about 3 years without working pretty much in Unity or making something tangible. Like I've been over the design and testing and like giving feedback continuously, but doing something on my own has been something that I haven't done in the 3 years and then started. And this was actually one of the first levels I got into doing. And also one of the last ones I ended up doing as well, because there are small things like the cameras that follow you. Like I think I've placed almost all of them in the game. Going forward, there are small things like books, wheelbarrows, masks, some pebbles somewhere, and some pills, sick stuff.
All the things you see in the beginning of the level, especially.
That the entry room was actually the thing I made in the going last.
Okay.
Because this was just an empty like passage. And at the beginning, like when you do something over time, your confidence build up, and like I felt like I was ready to do a full room, and I thought like, hey, let's do something like a minor a break. Like this is where you start and grab your equipment and get going to the day. And there's something like that was immensely fun to build for me, because most of the time I was there, like she made all the big things and the structure around it, and I just had to like put something here, and here, which was good because you could really see the difference all these small things made when you accumulated them. But I haven't done something from the bottom like that, and to be honest, like the first iteration I did, like Austere came over and said, this doesn't belong here. Nope. I'm like,
yes, okay. He's very strict about that.
But it's nice because when you have rules, it's easy to abide. When you learn them, of course.
I think it's interesting because, as we talked about in one of the first of these logs, this game started out as a university project where we all worked equally on the game. But then when we formed the company, we decided to take on different roles. So as a CEO, you did all the things besides the game, so you haven't really been into the game development for many years, and now you had the opportunity to jump back into it.
At least like knee deeps. Like I didn't like, it's not full dive.
No, but it was we really needed some last push in terms of the polish, and like the programmers, myself included, we were so busy with other stuff, so we just needed like to divide out the work. And I felt it worked really nicely.
Yes, it worked surprisingly well. I was a bit concerned also because being the CEO, there's a lot of jobs in one job there, and like being able to juggle that with also doing this was something I was afraid of. Like that, could I do it fast enough? Could I do it good enough? Because it's been so long, and like you start to like doubt your own ability to just jump into it again and go. But it went surprisingly smooth.
So I remember this level is actually the first level we really decorated. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this was the time when we had just decided that, okay, this part of the game will be in the mine. And I was researching how mines looked like and noticed a lot of tracks, obviously. And in this decoration and defining the mine style, because this was the first level that was in the mine that we decorated, I had to come up with something that would just dictate the rest of the mine levels. And I saw these moving platforms and turning things, and I thought, okay, well, how does that make sense in any way to be a real life thing? And there was thoughts about how electricity flows and how they regulate it with switches that turn around that were kind of similarly, and then I thought about how they redirect trains like that, and thus Railtrack Shifters were born because, well, they had to redirect minecarts somehow through this huge cavernous hole in the mountain. So I decided they had to turn the tracks.
Yeah. And I think it's worth to mention that the way that we make puzzles is that we start with it like without any graphics at all, just like the puzzle idea, and then you add the decorations and give meaning to like what is this room, and then we add sound effects on top of that. Like that's the last part of the pipeline.
Yeah, like when I look at the levels first, when I get them to decorate, they are made out of white and gray cubes or just tiles, and there is nothing there usually, and
then
it's a challenge.
Yes, you give it life. Yeah.
And the cool part about this level and the way it's built is that there's quite a lot of things in the dark, so that helped us figure out how it should look. I think you have more to tell about this.
Yeah. So like the art style of the game goes very, very far back. Like was one of the first things we did once we had a couple of puzzles. But we quickly found out that we really need to be able to see what's going on in the dark without like compromising and not making it look like dark. So the white lines in the dark is really helpful for that. And it also helps create the game or make the game look less flat because we don't really have textures, and that's where the edge detection comes into play. And I remember that we were really inspired by a game called White Knight, which had a really fantastic art style, similar to like Frank Miller comics and just basically old comics, which have been really fundamental to our art style. And when we added that, the puzzles became a bit more easier to read, and it also makes the room feel bigger because you can actually see much more, especially in this room, this level. And the reason why we don't have textures in our game is because, well, we are a little team, and we're making a very big game for this team size, and textures is actually it requires a lot of work. With maybe you can maybe talk about unwrapping models.
The sheer amount of objects in the game we have, and if I had to texture them, that would have taken like a few more years of development, so not a good idea. So in this case, I tried to convey the mood and that it's underwater and it's damp and in the mine with colors, and try to make our standard set of grayish blues just a little bit greener and a little bit warmer to give it that damp feeling, but just enough so that it still appears blue, but gives us a feeling that, there's dripping water from the ceiling and all that.
Yeah.
So in this level, it's the first time that the player encounters the portable lamp mechanic, as we call it. And we wanted to ease the player into getting to know the mechanic, getting familiar with it. So it's very simple. Once the player pushes the button and the lamp turns on this platform and enlightens the path so you can continue, when you jump onto the platform, you're kind of in a small playground that is totally encapsulated all the way around, so you can't escape with the lamp. Because a rule in our game is that once you have a portable anything mechanic in your hand, you can't jump. And we encapsulated the player on this small platform to kind of limit their movement with the lamp and kind of get a feel for how it handled. And also we experienced in tests that people thought that they could jump with the lamp when they had to jump the gap, but they got a feeling that maybe I hit the space button too late. So we kept it very simple and contained them in this small pit. And the puzzle is, I don't know if you can call it a puzzle, but it's very streamlined level, so you can't really do it wrong. You have to point the lamp in the right direction to continue in the level. So once you continue beyond the platform with the lamp and you hit the button, the platform turns again, and the lamp will then illuminate the next path to the second part of the level, which was originally completely open, but is now closed off with a gate, giant metal gate that is open, And the original idea was just to make the level feel, or the place feel bigger than just the puzzle area. The convenience of a small puzzle area where just the puzzle fit into, and then nothing beyond that. So the problem with that was that you were just simply walking for quite a distance without anything really happening. So we came up with just again a simple idea of having another jump puzzle with a train wagon moving sideways to kind of indicate that there's also moving light sources that you have to follow, or moving shadows rather, that you have to be aware of, and again to emphasize the danger of the shadows.
So it's a very simple lamp puzzle, and then a small shadow puzzle at the end.
Just to
ease
the player into it.
And for the sound in this level, it's a very, very huge level. It's a big level, and I've, as sound designer, I've worked a lot with the feeling of space and the reverb in the levels is very important. So in this level, the reverb is very long. It's actually the system behind is 6 different reverbs that I can mix in the game in specific areas.
Because it also changes a lot in the room size. You can, for instance, when you get to the metal gate towards the ending, you're kind of shrinking down the room around you.
The room size, yeah. So that's also in the connection halls. It's all they are always kind of small, so it kind of makes you feel safe because you don't have all this reverb around you. It's more enclosed in the connection halls. And also in this level we have the shadow Dex puzzle at the end. We have this train wagon that runs, and it's kind of a funny little thing because I encountered the problem that because the animation will reset the wagon, it also reset the sound, so it kind of clicked in place. So then we needed a solution for that. So behind the scenes, it's actually a circular motion of sound instead of the sound just snapping back with the animation.
So is it like a point with sound that runs in a circle back to its own starting position and continues? Yeah, and then obviously with the animation for the visible train wagon, it just resets once it hits its last mark in its animation path. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is one of the more fundamental puzzles in our game. It seems very simple because you don't just have a couple of lamps you can play with, but we found out that this is a really important concept that this level teaches you.
Yeah, it's a concept that we use in different puzzles where we build on it, and that concept is being able to like bend around corners with light. So use one lamp to light back and grab the other one, and then you can build on that.
Yeah.
Like I remember we were inspired by Taoist principle and like the jammers there.
Yeah.
Some of the introductory puzzles for jammers were kind of felt like this one. I remember,
Yeah, and it was really interesting because at this point in the development, we already went to a couple of conferences to show our puzzles, but we also went to like the local library. And normally when you playtest, people know that they're being playtested. So what happens is they're very polite and gentle, like they don't want to offend you if they think the game is not good. And we did not want that. We wanted like a real feedback. So we talked to one of the people at the library, and they actually have a lot of gaming equipment, like AAA games you can just come and play. So we asked, what if we install our game on your computer, and then we just go behind a couple of bookshelves and just stand there, so the kids who go in there, they think this is actually a real game and will play it if it is fun, and if not, then they will leave. So we did that, and it was really an eye-opener to get like real feedback and seeing how they enjoyed it and when they didn't enjoy it. And this puzzle was quite interesting to see, because some people, they just got it immediately, like the idea about using one lamp and then placing the other lamp at the cone of that, and like using it to bend around corners. And other people, they didn't get it at all and became quite frustrated. So that was really valuable feedback we received, and we could go back and like change it so to make it more intuitive.
So in this level, the player once again sees the core, but now from the bottom, very bottom of the core, in the mine. And it was important for us to show the core again, because it's such a big part of the story of this game, and then you're gonna see it throughout the whole game in different places. And also, like having a huge beam, science beam extending through the whole facility, it's just cool. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things we talked about a lot back then was also the Citadel in Half-Life 2, like having this landmark.
Half-Life 2 once again.
Yeah, that you keep moving towards, like
yeah,
like a goal. Yeah.
Yeah, and this was where we actually started building the look of the core, because even though you see it in the upper levels of the facility first, we didn't have those levels built at that point where I was decorating this one. And we had to come up with how it looks like, and we always knew it connects some crystals. At some point it was 3 with 1 in the middle, but not anymore. But I knew that there had to be a crystal that's huge, or an amalgamation of crystals that are connected. But one crystal turned out to be a bit more readable, and we had to suspend it and give it a certain look that would be recognizable after having played puzzles for an hour. So it was one of the bigger props, so something interesting. And given that we already had the light beams that you walk around with the photon connectors, and those were suspended on electromagnets, I thought, yes, we're just going to scale it up a lot. So we made these electromagnets in the bottom, but then my thought was, okay, what keeps it from just flying off to the side? And we added these electromagnets that just poke into the wall and hold it stable, or somewhat stable. It's still moving a bit, and that way we got to create some lines that are pointing towards the crystal and create more focus on it. And at the same time, we had to create something that goes around the beam, because also at that point we didn't have that much visual effects, and the beam looked way worse. So we had to create some sort of carcass that also, science-wise, it made sense that it holds the sensors, and it absorbs light from the light beam and creates more energy. So we had to create a carcass, which went through quite a few iterations, but eventually I ended up looking at some Gaudi works and taking inspiration from that, and I listened to some podcasts about how he created his designs and tried to stick to a similar principle and created this sort of a little more natural looking structure that goes around.
And this level is, like, in the beginning it was only like the puzzle itself was the whole level basically. So we extended the area of this level quite a bit, because we wanted a more epic view to the core once you entered the room. First off, in the first iteration, the core was kind of stuck in a corner of the puzzle, but that presented some problems of why doesn't the core light up the puzzle? And yeah, obviously that will ruin the puzzle, because you need shadows in certain places. So we went with this very like huge cave opening where you see the crystal in the distance, like this huge crystal that is it just looks powerful and epic. And also, I don't remember, did we extend the way up to the puzzle a bit because we wanted Virgil to finish his speak?
Yeah, well, we
Something
can't
like
we
that.
can't be sure that he's finished talking
Oh,
when
yeah.
the player gets there,
Yeah.
but
Okay, still not.
but it still helps
Yeah.
because we do have a lot to convey in this puzzle,
Yes.
and yeah, I guess I can start with that. So it is a character trait that Virgil enjoys talking about the things he's accomplished and the things that he's built, and it kind of felt natural because he's pretty arrogant and has a huge ego, but the reason for it is actually so we have someone who explains like the universe and things that are going on, and some exposition with that. And in order to not make it feel too forced, we made it just a natural like character trait. And also the other thing that he mentions in this level is building on the like your identity as a player, where like questions, oh yeah, who are you? And we did that primarily to keep that mystery going, so you keep questioning, well, am I an inspector, and to have some questions floating in the air regarding that, but also to tell something about Virgil, like what are the things he worries about. And of course, you know, he's a guy with very much like the ends justify the means, and of course, an health and safety inspector would be something he would worry about, a guy like that sneaking around. And so it's a way to get him like more of his character fleshed out, get some more depth, but also give him a great reason to insult you like crazy.
Again and again and again.
Yes.
Yeah, and the puzzle itself started out as, it was a way to show the importance, or emphasize the importance of pointing a lamp in the correct direction. So it actually, for a long time, for a lot of us in the team, was kind of felt like a tedious puzzle because it was a lot of back and forth with the lamps. But it's our way to force the player to really think about how they place the lamps. Because if they place it just a tiny bit wrongly, they have to kind of backtrack and redo their steps to get it right. And that's a kind of a rule throughout the whole game. You have to be very aware of how you point the lamps. So that was the basis for this puzzle, and then of course it evolved into, first off it was actually in a tile-based facility-like setting, very simple in our...
I remember solving that. That was actually the first puzzle that I tried solving in this game.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point it was just plain tiles, and I got so lost so many times. And when I got to making it, I knew it had to be something asymmetric and something to give you a sense of where you are at that point.
Mm-hmm. Was it tedious when you...
Yes, very tedious. It took me so long.
It might still be, I don't know. It's difficult to not be biased. But it explains, emphasizes that important rule in our game, or at least idea that you have to place them correctly. So yeah, to get away from the tile-based setting, we already had the cave-like look, and we knew that this part was going to be in the cave. But I mean, going from the tile look to the cave look was quite challenging, because obviously the tiles follow our system, our what's it called?
Just modularity and measurements.
Yes, exactly. Where the rocks are much more natural, and all the rock walls and some of the roof are basically 3 models, objects that are scaled and rotated differently to give this look. And yeah, scaling it up, it had a very protruding parts of the object. So if you rotate it one way, it might stick into the level, because it's scaled up hugely. In some places it might stick into the level at points, and then you had to rotate it back, but then you had a problem in the other end of the object, and it's just...
Yeah.
Building rock walls is not an easy thing.
No.
I remember the rock floor was a problem as well, because it's hard to get it actually to draw lines well in the edge section, because it's floor that's scaled and rotated in funky ways that it would often look flat.
It just had to be that way, because at first I tried to build the modules, but nobody, like, there is no natural rock that casts a square shadow.
Yeah.
Just no. So we had to improvise that and make it as natural as possible.
Yeah, so in some cases the rock floor looked a bit like snow.
Yeah.
But then Philip went in and added
I made some
rocks.
bumps and gave him tools to place those bumps on the floor and make it less snowy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to add a bit to the mine, we were facing this problem that the game looked really stale and dead at that point. And I tried to make a rat that would run, but that so clashed with the logic because it would obviously die and sink into the shadow, and we couldn't make it just sit in light. So eventually I made bats because they're airborne and therefore would not sink into the shadowy floor, which is like a little bit of a go around, but it does create some motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's generally been a problem,
Yeah.
creating movement. Like,
And a thing that we also implemented to combat that is particle effects, like just random dust effects in the air,
Yeah.
which came in like the last week of development.
yeah, pretty much.
Even though throughout the whole building I try to make as many passively animating objects as possible. There's fans on desks and all sorts of perpetual motion toys and machinery that just keeps on working, but it's hard to make an environment so big look interesting and dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is one of the first puzzles we made a long time ago, where we it started out as a little sketch, and then we created a really primitive gray boxed version of it, where we actually called it moving wall. It was just a wall moving back and forth and some lamps. And we did that in a phase where we were creating a vertical slice for the game within the first half year of the project.
Yeah, so when you make games, it's always about like how do you find resources to continue working on games, because they take a long time to develop. And when we began this project, we had no money, so we kind of had to go out and seek investment and funding. So we spent the first half year, maybe a year, just making a lot of puzzles, like proof of concepts. And then you make this thing that is called a vertical slice, which is basically like a wide array of like things to show that the game will contain, but not in a polished state. More like, okay, this is a puzzle game. We will show you 10 different kinds of puzzles. And this was one of those puzzles that we took, and we put it in with a lot of other puzzles, and made one demo that we showcased to an investor. And when they saw this, they felt this was an interesting concept, and we started talking back and forth in the hope of like getting investments in the game so we could continue working on it. But it took a long time, so this old prototype underwent a lot of iterations. And like when you look at it now and when you look at back then, of course it's the same concept with a moving wall, but it looks so much differently. It looks so much nicer now, and it has also a bigger purpose, like this. What is a decontaminator? No, not what is it?
It's a mineral decontaminator. Yeah.
Exactly. So.
Yeah, I think it's a fun example of how we like the narrative kind of coats things, or like how we in the beginning it was just a wall, and now it actually has a purpose in the story. And we have several voice lines where Virgil talks about this thing. If you actually stay in the level a bit and listen to the in-betweeners. And I think that the original, it was always meant as a one of the initial puzzles, like an introductory puzzle. In the vertical slice, it was also one of the first ones, and it was to get some timing elements into the game without it being twitchy, without you having to be really fast, but where you have to think about it, stop and think about it. And it was also, I remember back then we didn't have many puzzles where things moved. The game looked very static. Yeah. So that's also where it contributed a bit. Yeah.
As far as I remember, in the original version, there was actually not a gap behind the wall. You could actually take the lamp with you. Or I don't know if you could, but at that point we found out that having multiple lamps close to each other, it just felt really unelegant. It was not nice. Like, we really want you to use the lamps in an efficient way, so that's why we put in a gap. But then it introduced the other problem of, like, players didn't know that you're not supposed to jump with a lamp. So that meant that we had to have other levels before this to kind of like teach you the fact that the lamps cannot be jumped with. And like, through a lot of playtesting, I think we got it now. It seems like most people understand it. But if you take the lamp and fall down, then it's okay because the checkpoint just puts you back. But small things like that, it takes a lot of playtesting to find.
Yeah, I think this puzzle reinforces the idea that you can't jump with the lamp.
Yeah.
And I remember when you, like, the volumetric lighting that we have, and when you target point a lamp towards the wall and you see the light rays come through.
Yeah.
We've used that shot for many things.
That was some of the early GIFs we put up online, and it just looks nice.
Yes.
So this level had an interesting story. When we created first, we used Lego. What was the point or the idea of this level?
When we were designing this level, we were very much in the phase of making puzzles where the player has to predict that some things will happen. So the basic concept for this puzzle was leaving a lamp in the dark and predicting that you might need it later.
Yeah, because we saw some players, some players had a hard time understanding that it's only the player who cannot stand in shadows. Like, you can leave something out in the shadow and then get back to it later. So you could place a lamp and then change some other part of the level, and then depending on where you put that lamp beforehand, you could use that to actually solve a puzzle.
Yes. And it turned out that this puzzle was much harder than we originally thought it would be. Even after we worked on the readability of the puzzle and really made everything easy to understand, then it was still difficult for people to play. And in the beginning, they could spend 15-20 minutes completing this puzzle.
Yeah, and one thing when you design puzzles is very difficult to know if the puzzle itself is difficult or if it is just the readability of it, like if it is too cluttered. I remember when we made it in the first iteration, it was very difficult to read, and like, where's the goal, where I'm supposed to go. Yeah. And over time we kind of like took things away and made it simpler and simpler to focus on the core part of the puzzle. And now it's this level where we actually just have like two main parts of the level, where you have a lamp with the moving platform, and then you have a lamp on the other side, and there's a gap, so you cannot get those two lamps next to each other. So you have to figure out, how can I use them to my advantage? And that was quite interesting to work with.
Yeah, I even to the readability part, I remember that we had a version of it where you start and you had an overview of the level before you went into the level, because that was our way of showing this is where the exit is.
Yeah.
But that was a very primitive way of showing it.
Yeah.
And now we think we've built up the level so it's more obvious where the exit is.
Yeah, and when we made puzzles for this game, we have never made puzzles before. So for us, it was an interesting process to just learn, like, the idea of finding the idea for a puzzle and then making it look good and be easy to like read. There are two very different processes, where when we made this, it was very ugly and very difficult to navigate, but we had a core concept that was interesting, so we kind of had to just keep on polishing and making more and more simple, and using a lot of playtesters to see where does this make sense and what could we do to like make it easier to navigate.
I remember we had probably 3 iterations on in Lego before we started building it.
Yeah.
And when we test in Lego, we test internally, but then when we build the level, which usually takes a day or so, then we start testing externally.
Yeah, and the thing with doing it in Lego is, when you do it in physical Lego, you see it from above, and that's very different from when you actually play it inside the game itself. So the overview that we felt we had, a new player doesn't have that. So we really have to simplify everything, and that goes for like all levels in the game. That the first iteration is always very difficult to read, especially when you're not a designer or a graphical person. Like we are just programmers doing this and learning how to make puzzles. There was also some part of the last part of this level has some story-related stuff where we tried to convey some things with this bridge that collapsed, but it underwent a couple of iterations. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the idea with having a bridge that collapses in the end was to kind of show that this place is the facility is crumbling. Things are getting destroyed. So that's a thing we planned early that would happen there, and also so that you feel like the story like shifts, like things like unexpected things happen. But it also became kind of a joke. Like,
Yeah.
Internally, we always like if someone was late to work or something, we would say, "Oh, the bridge collapsed."
Yeah, one of our teammates, he actually lives across a bridge, and once in a while it has to open so the boats can go through, and he has to wait for like 10 minutes because of the bridge. So that was kind of a funny joke.
Yeah, and also because it's a little silly, a little funny that nothing works in Lightmatter technologies. Everything breaks.
Yeah, I believe this was one of the first parts of the game where we said this is going to be like quote unquote a set piece moment with like things happening, like Virgil being a little annoyed by this bridge and like it collapses and the audio and stuff like that. And when we actually got it in and the physics and stuff, it was really nice to see, because beforehand the levels felt very empty and very static, and now we actually had some more dynamic story-related content in the game.
Yeah, and we wanted Virgil to have that Virgil is a very collected and despite the circumstances, pretty happy guy. But we want to like build up that he can get very angry. And this is like the first step in that direction, very small step, that he like blames you for because you're a health and safety inspector, and no matter what he does, even though his stuff is approved by inspectors, it still doesn't work. And we also took the opportunity to introduce James, the security manager here, so that to show that James he like there's someone else outside of this facility too, and to have like a little sidekick for Virgil, and this felt like a fitting introduction for that.
Yeah, so one element in this game is dexterity-based puzzles, and for a long time we were very unsure if we actually wanted it or not, because for us, Lightmatter is a game where you have to think and like solve puzzles, but doing it should not be the difficult part. So even if you're not good at like first-person controls, you should still be able to complete a puzzle if you can like think and solve the puzzle up in your head. The control should not be what is preventing you from doing it. That being said, we also thought it was a little like too obvious not to have moving shadows. So I guess this level is like a good way to kind of have something where you have to understand that a shadow coming close to you and you have to kind of jump over it while it approaches you, but doing it should not be too difficult. But I guess you came up with this initial concept, and you had some ideas when you built it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to try making a puzzle where we had shadows that were moving, and also one of my ideas was to try to reuse the level in. The puzzle level in more than one level. So you use the shadows in the bottom. Yeah. And you use this that you need the speed of the shadow to
jump over them.
Yeah, you need that, because the shadow is actually too big if it was just still. And then the platforms that are moving, you use them also when you need to get the lamp, so you need to jump on those and
and it's really nice that you actually like use the same platforms one more time and put the lamp on top of it. I remember when I played the first eureka moment is like you have to jump over the shadows while they approach you. That was really nice. Yeah. But then when you get up there with the lamp, it's like, oh, I have to use the platforms again, but now in a different way. And then you also see that, oh, okay, the lamp can actually stand in the shadows, so you can just place it and then jump over and then grab it again. I thought that was really a nice experience.
But we were very careful about doing Dex puzzles.
Yeah.
So also because it is a puzzle game, and we don't want it to stress the player with very difficult decks.
Yeah, it is very difficult to design stuff like this because ideally we want to challenge the players, but we also had a feeling that this could be a game for more than just the average gamer. It could be something that a broader audience would like to play, but the thing is, moving around in first person is just difficult if you have never played a game before, and jumping is even more difficult. So we want everyone to be able to complete the game, but we also want to have challenge. So yeah, hopefully most people can complete this, but yeah, we have tested it so much as possible, and we haven't seen people having problems with this particular level.
So this small puzzle is very simple, but we like it a lot. No, it's to this day kind of still baffles us that it is challenging because the concept is so easy. It uses the properties of the lamp, portable lamp, basically as it is, and the light cone, meaning that the farther away it is from something, the more it illuminates in front of it. At the same time, at this point in the game, we go into some puzzles afterwards that are not really fitting in the mine section of the game. So it was natural to make the shift from the mine area into something more factory tile based ish. And that's how we came up with the behind the scenes look, where you go into some more, what we say, basically where the workers would
hide tapes.
I don't know. They would walk around and work on stuff. Like all the scientists doesn't have to look at all this stuff. It's the what is it?
It's a ventilation area.
Yeah. Basically. And
I guess like one of the main purposes of that is also to break up the look a bit, right? For pacing wise, different colors.
Yeah.
And also we knew that the levels to come here are have huge fans, and they belong to a different area. It's very obvious.
Yeah, we knew we had to make the changing look at some point.
Yep.
And it just felt natural that pacing wise that it would be here.
Mm-hmm.
But also, since the levels that come next are of more of a difficult, what do you say? Nature. Sorry. It just felt right to put this puzzle here. Even though it's tricky to some people, it's still still a small compact puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much you can do, so you'll figure it out eventually. And it was just a good fit pacing wise.
And it was also like the end of the puzzle is also a bit different than many other, because you the exit signs that you usually follow, you can't really enter through the door. I guess the purpose of that was that you feel like you discover the area into behind the scenes a bit yourself. I mean, it's really obvious that you have to go there, but we kind of like the idea of Virgil being surprised that you actually made it out of that room, because the idea is that he doesn't see that he leaves you in the beginning of the room, or the beginning of the level, and then he gets surprised later that you made it out of there. He doesn't see that the door is actually not working.
No. It was also a nice excuse to make a big change in the graphics, like the environment at least.
Yes, exactly. The idea in the beginning was actually that when you move into the these behind the scenes area, you know, the fan area, that there wouldn't be any narrative at all. Like it would be 2 levels where you're just left to yourself. However, during the end phase of the project, very late in the project, we actually changed the script and added a new character, which is Ellen, whose tapes you find in this behind the scenes area. And the reason why we implemented that character is to add some more mystery to the story, fill out the backstory of Lightmatter technologies better, but also make play a bit with the player's expectations. So to make plot points less obvious. And we also felt like as a bonus that it helped fill out these behind the scenes area, that that the narrative would progress although Virgil wasn't there talking to you. And despite it being a trope, having these audio logs, we went with the idea because we kind of considered, should we have something that you pick up and read in these areas? But we don't like to, personally, we don't really like games that do that, where you have to read a lot and break the gameplay, because it feels like you get taken out of the experience. We want to integrate it so you can keep solving puzzles, keep playing the game while getting story, basically. And also we felt like our game has a very simple feel to it, without like interfaces and without inventory, yeah, a bunch of menus. It feels it feels very minimalistic. So we felt that having these audio logs actually fit into the whole feel of the game. Yeah.
And it's convenient.
It is convenient, and that is also, you know, it's always a huge problem in games with audio logs. Like, why are these placed so conveniently right here? Why is he telling his master evil plan in this tape? It
kind of makes sense, because behind the scenes there's no cameras, at least in our facility.
So that's why she's hiding it there.
And Virgil wouldn't be able to react to them.
Exactly. She's just hiding it anywhere she can. Yeah, that's basically the way we explain it.
And you also removed some VOs from, or voiceover lines from Virgil's script, right?
Yeah. We that's the thing. You know, game development is very iterative. Even the story was iterative, and we, after some playtesting, we found that some of the things that Virgil said were unnatural, that it came out of his mouth. Like, there were exposition points that were weird for him to say, because it would be information that he was trying to hide. Therefore, it made sense to have that come through a different perspective, through a different character.
So it was things we needed to tell, but it felt weird because he was our only character. Exactly. It was weird having him tell you. Yeah,
and there was also people who got a bit fatigued with only having one character. Like the game also felt a bit more like it was on a budget. It became apparent because we only have one voice actor.
Yeah.
Another thing we did to combat that is also that, as you probably noticed in one of the earlier scenes, that you hear James through the telephone. And that was also to give a bit more life to the universe. Yeah. Felt a bit empty that Virgil is the only man existing in this place that you kind of notice. Yeah.
Plus, it gives a bit more backstory to Arthur as well.
Exactly. Arthur was very one-dimensional in the beginning, and I mean, he's still not a character you know a lot about, but it gave him some depth that you have heard talking about him in a different way than Virgil does. And also you have heard talking about Virgil in a different way than that you might expect. Yeah. Oh yeah, and a fun fact, I can actually mention that the reason why choosing the voice actor for Ellen, she reached out to us really early in the project, like after the first year, and there we had like the idea that we were going to have a male voice actor because we wanted like a mad scientist guy, and so we didn't really listen to her audition, but she sent us a mail, and you know, we wrote back and said thanks, but it wasn't really something we considered. But then all of a sudden we developed this character, and then I saw like in one of my notes that I written, like remember to listen to Natalie's audition, and then I did that. I went back, like I found that old mail, and then we thought it would fit perfectly for the character we wanted to create. So, piece of advice to any voice actors: just reach out to studios. You might not know when they need you, basically. Yeah,
it's a feel good story.
Yep.
So, speaking generally about this level, it's actually a primer level, meaning that it leads up to the next level that comes afterwards. And when we have been making puzzles, like oftentimes you actually end up making really hard puzzles to start out with that introduces a lot of new elements for the player, and we found out that that was actually too much to chew on for a lot of players to get all this new information on how to do stuff. So this level was actually an offspring of the next level, like to prime and to like teach the player this new functionality with the rotating fan here, and that idea of like always like design wise give out a reach your hand to the player to help them like keep the momentum and the flow of their game experience is something that is super important for a game like this, where sequencing is king in terms of keeping the player immersed in the experience. And so this idea of having a primer puzzle where one leads up to another with introducing new elements is actually something we use several times throughout the game experience.
Yeah, and given that this specific puzzle is quite an old one and people have been sure about it for a while, it was one of the first puzzles where I had to figure out what this place really is. So when I first saw that puzzle, like the first time I solved it, it was this big rotating plus in a cylinder, and that's all there was. And it somehow came naturally that yes, it should be a fan, and in both this one and next one we should use that same fan to keep the continuity, and as Philip said, prime people that this is the same mechanic that you're using. And it became a cornerstone for this whole area that this is ventilation, because well, we had these big fans, what else could it be?
Yeah, you mean for the red rooms, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, just that fact that there was this big rotating thing in the middle led to the fact that it became a fan, and then the whole area became ventilation, and then we colored it, and then Benjamin added crystalline particles, and it all came from that big rotating plus. And in that sense, making levels for this game and making sense of them and figuring out what these big moving strangely shaped objects are is a lot like cloud watching. Like when you sit out and look at the sky and say, okay, this one looks like an elephant and this one looks like a big hat. In that way I look at the levels and try to imagine what does it look like, what would make sense in universe, which is a fun thing.
And not easy, because everything needs to be connected with each other somehow.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of design restrictions, and I wanted to talk a bit about the slope part of this puzzle, because the way you light up the floor, if I placed anything on it, it would cast very bad shadows that would hinder gameplay. So in this sense, it was interesting to work with this restriction that I have to make a floor look interesting by not placing absolutely anything on it. So that's fun.
It's so weird, because this puzzle in specific with the slope, you need to your light needs to go very far away for the other lamp to be able to reach the top of the slope, and that whole floor should just be emptied out of stuff.
Yeah.
So how it's just like you need to this is a prime example of like how game mechanic like takes priority over graphics.
Yeah.
In this example, and you should know, Austere, that I'm a big fan of this room.
Thanks.
So this was one of the levels that were originally built with Lego. I think I had a time where I designed a lot of Lego puzzles, like with things that were turning around, and this was one of the puzzles that we felt fit the game, and also one of the older puzzles that we had a long time ago.
One of the very first, actually, more difficult ones.
Yeah. So we more or less made this concept in Lego, and then we took it further into the game itself, and there were some difficulties with designing this puzzle. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yes, there were actually quite a lot. I think this is also one of the levels that has went through most iterations over the time. As you mentioned, it was one of the first puzzles, so we've had a lot of time to... We've always believed in this puzzle and thought that it could become good in the end. Yeah. So it has been in the hands of actually quite a few people who has made it work better and better over time. Like for the setting of for the puzzle, we knew that like the main structure of the thing are these fans, like the spinning thing in the middle of a round room. But how could we make a sense of it? Because it didn't look okay. It had the shape of a fan, but with only 4 blades.
Yeah.
But it kind of had to make more sense so it fit the facility. So Austere came up with the idea of making it into like a fan area, combined with the previous puzzle, and kind of make a theme out of it from behind the scenes. There's some like why is the player jumping around on fans? It's one of those levels that kind of doesn't make sense. And why do you have buttons in different rooms that rotate the thing? But yeah. We tried to make sense of it as well as we could.
I think maybe, at least from my perspective, one of the reasons why it looks as it does is because I took inspiration from some of the like hub areas in maybe some of the old Zelda games, where there's like one big thing that rotates and like kind of changes the whole level. And I like the idea of like using the playable space like in 360 degrees around you. And that is kind of a very gamey kind of level. So it is difficult to make it make sense in a universe kind of way. But like we tested it with a lot of people at conventions, and it felt like this was one of the better puzzles. It had the right amount of like difficulty, and you have to understand how you use the lamps, and you have to understand that you place the lamp on the tip of the fan blade, and then the angle of the lamp is important. Like what way is it turned? So when you actually press the button, it should align up with the slope in the end.
Yeah, it is kind of foreseeing what will happen if I place the lamp like this and press the button and rotate the fan. I think actually also because it was one of the first puzzles. It was, I think, the first puzzle that delved into leaving the lamp on something and then sending it away.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, to make it flow better throughout the game, we came up with a lot of the other levels that also kind of does the same, mostly with moving platforms. But it also design-wise, because it's red behind the scene themed, and like a lot of the details can drown in the darker red colors. We had some trouble with people knowing like where they were in relation to the ramp they have to proceed on. So that's one of the things we struggled with in a long time. So we tried to kind of make all of the entrances a bit more unique. I mean, they're all the same kind of opening, but the things around them to give a sense of which room you are in and what direction you are looking. And also later on, in the first iteration, I think you just had to go up the ramp like outside the level, kind of, and then you would head to the exit. or right up to the exit. But then we extended the thing to go through the whole puzzle area as well, to kind of emphasize the exit above the whole puzzle area actually.
And it looks nice when you look down at the level itself.
Yeah, it looks pretty cool with all the beams and rafters that you should shine light through.
Yeah, and it also turned out that these Ellen tapes, we need that space to kind of like let her talk, so the bridge is just the right length. So that fit nicely for that.
Yeah, and then the end of the level is where you exit the behind the scenes area and have now gone into the next area of the game.
So this level is quite important in terms of the release of this game, because as an indie game company, publishing a game is quite difficult. There come a lot of games on Steam every day, and we needed something extra to kind of like be recognized with our game. And we've been for a long time been looking for a publisher who could help us like get the game out to people. And after much search, we found Aspire, who is helping publishing the game. And one of the first things they suggested was, why don't you just give away part of the game for free? And why don't you just give away, let's say, an hour of the game? And that was quite a tough question for us. So what was the reasoning behind this? And
So first off, being asked to give such a big part of your game and your baby away for free is like that. The idea in itself in the beginning was it was overstepping some boundaries we were not like prepared for, and maybe that was also like that provocation. We have talked with so many people that have offered publishing services and PR service and stuff like that over the years, and we found that those who can provoke you in a good way with your product and how you perceive it yourself, who don't just like stand behind you and push forward your own ideas, but also come with their own ideas. Those are the one you should really listen to, because they can, in our experience at least, because they can help you do something different, because the way you see your game is the way that a mother sees their children.
Yeah, so they proposed this free-to-try model.
Yes.
And what can you just describe it a little bit?
Yes, basically it is that there is this progression blocker we put into the game, where you can actually just grab the game, download it for free, and then play what is an hour worth of content for free. And then you can then you get to this progression blocker, where you can pay the amount for the full game, and then your progress is saved onto the full game. So it's basically just a integrated demo, sort of like.
But it's a model that has been used many places, especially on mobile, where you kind of just download it and play it, and if you want to continue, you pay for it. But it's not that common on like PC games.
No.
And a lot of people were like, is this free to play or free to try? And there's a difference, because we were really afraid that people would think that this is a game where there's a lot of in-app purchases and stuff like that.
Yes, and because when you sell a game, what you're selling before people are buying is most of the time expectations of what to the potential buyer, like what can they expect to get from the product they're buying. And if we are selling something where they get some wrong expectations from our sales pitch, which is the Steam page and the tags and all the things, like we will not convey the things that the game is about, and that was some huge concern for us. Like it's the same with our game. Like we have really fought a hard battle to keep it away from being a scary game. And this is kind of the same, because if people go into this game expecting it to be scary or horror-like in some ways, like people will be disappointed, because that's not our game.
And but the I guess the overall thing with this was that the publisher said, we think people like this game. If they get their hands on it, they will love it. So why don't we give it to people and like give them the opportunity to experience part of it, and
Exactly.
then they can make the decision if they want to buy the game.
Yeah, a game like ours is best explained through your fingers.
Yeah.
Like playing it.
Yeah.
And how do we get people to play it without buying it? Well, that's to give out content for free,
Yes.
and by that we could better like convey what this game was about for real.
Yeah.
And over time we were really it really grew on us, this idea, until the point where we like, let's do this.
Yes, and depending on how or if you purchased the game, we wanted it to be a little tongue in cheek, where there's this Tull booth, and we have David Basin recording some I don't know, some VOs that were a little bit like mocking the player, like you have to pay to get through it, and we thought it was funny to do it in universe and like make a little fun of, like, you know, when you buy a game or buy an item in a mobile game or something, it's really generic, it's just a pop-up and it looks not that good in my opinion.
Oftentimes, and this thing about playing with the idea of how people should buy it that was something we really wanted to have done in our own way.
Yeah.
And we're really happy with the result of how it ended up being, and we feel like this is our own way of doing it.
Yes.
And that is the most important thing, because even though ideas come from all over the place, but it's not about where you get your ideas from, it's how you implement them with your own beliefs and your own thoughts into it, and that's about making stuff your own. Another big design choice we had to do in this was like, where do we put this progression blocker in?
Yeah.
And we've been talking, like, we started by talking like, okay, a percentage of the game should be like here, but okay, how does that put us in terms of the story progression, the puzzle progression, where are we? And the more we worked with it, the less attached we were to like giving, like we actually wanted to give more and more away.
Yeah.
The more we worked with it, and that was quite a funny experience to go through, because as we said, like in the beginning we were very strict and tight about this. Like we were almost like no.
Yes.
But in the end, like we could like just give more and more away, and we ended up looking at some different parameters to like where we wanted to have this progression blocker.
Yeah, both in terms of time and also mechanics, and I think saying you get an hour of the game for free is like an easy way to explain it, and you get just enough of a glimpse of what this game has, like both in terms of the game mechanics but also in terms of the universe. Like it was important for us that you went into the scenes before this level where you hear Ellen, the character who speaks to you through a tape recorder.
Yeah.
And just to show that there's more in this game than what you just saw in the first level.
Yes, it like the universe. We needed the universe to expand, but just enough.
Yeah.
So we didn't want to give too much away, but we still wanted to give enough away that it had that teaser effect. And the same with puzzle-wise, when the level here that you're in, like it introduces this new thing with the
sensors, yeah,
exactly, and it's just to give a taste of something more, that you know that the game will change, and there will be more to it, and that was why we chose to like end at this level for the free to try model.